Welcome back. In today's explainer, we are totally decoding the invisible engines of modern society, water utilities. We rarely give them a second thought until the tap suddenly runs dry, but behind the scenes, there is this highly structured, fiercely data-driven world keeping our infrastructure alive. Today, we're using the official SASB and SICS frameworks to give you the exact blueprint analysts use to evaluate these massive, essential systems.
Seriously, think about this for a second. Every single time you turn on a faucet or flush a toilet, you are relying on an incredibly complex network. But how do we actually measure the survival and the resilience of these systems? Like, how do investors really know if a water utility is built to last through the next century or if it's teetering on the brink of a catastrophic failure?
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our blueprint for today's explainer. First, we'll define the IFW industry. Second, we'll measure operational and network efficiency. Third, we'll look at quality, access, and affordability. And finally, we're going to explore climate resiliency and future-proofing.
Right, starting off with Section 1, defining the IFW industry. Because before we can measure sustainability, we've got to draw a strict boundary around who and what we're actually analyzing here.
So under the Sustainable Industry Classification System, which, by the way, is now officially run by the International Sustainability Standards Board, this whole sector gets the specific designation IFW-U. It's essentially the global language for sustainability disclosure. It ensures that when a utility reports its risks, absolutely everyone is speaking the exact same language.
So what actually falls under this IFW umbrella? Well, it splits into two totally distinct operational models. On one side, you have your regulated utility businesses. These are the folks who physically own and operate the water supply and wastewater treatment systems. On the other side, you've got market-based operations, which are specialized entities hired to provide operational services directly to those system owners. And a really crucial side note here, infrastructure design and construction completely excluded from this category. We are strictly talking operations.
Moving right along to Section 2, Operational and Network Efficiency. I want you to picture a day in the life of a single drop of water, and just the insane amount of energy required to move it from a river, through a treatment plant, into your home, and back out again.
Moving millions of gallons of water is literally heavy lifting. In fact, a utility's absolute biggest operating cost, right after the water itself, the chemicals, and the labor, is energy. The framework measures this strictly in gigajoules, tracking exactly how much juice comes from grid electricity versus renewables. Now, what's really interesting about this is a kind of catch-22. As climate change makes fresh water scarcer, utilities have to lean on alternative treatments, like desalination. But those methods are huge energy hogs, so if their local power grid isn't green, their Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions can absolutely skyrocket.
But honestly, all that energy is completely wasted if the water never even reaches you. In the industry, analysts formally track this as non-revenue real water losses. But let's ditch the jargon, let's just call it ghost water. We're talking about the physical leaks from pressurized mains and storage tanks that happen before the water ever crosses a customer's meter. It is basically the infrastructure equivalent of a ghost swiping cash straight out of the register.
And man, that ghost water literally drains profits. Every single drop that leaks into the dirt takes all that expensive pumping energy and those pricey treatment chemicals right along with it. So aggressively directing capital into pipeline repair, that is not just some feel-good environmental PR move, it's a make-or-break financial strategy to stop the literal leaking of revenue.
Okay, on to Section 3, quality, access, and affordability. Because we have to remember, water utilities aren't just regular businesses, they are literal lifelines.
The accounting frameworks actually bake this reality right in. Since reliable, clean water access is widely considered a basic human right, a utility has to structure its rates in a way the community feels is fair. If they drop the ball on this, they risk losing their social license to operate. You get fierce community opposition, and suddenly, good luck getting any funding approved for future growth or infrastructure.
So how do you mathematically measure fairness? Analysts dig into these specific accounting metrics. They aren't just glancing at the average retail water rate across residential and commercial accounts. No, they look at the hard truth, the exact number of residential disconnections for non-payment and the percentage of those customers who actually got reconnected within 30 days. By stacking these numbers against the local economy, analysts can quantify definitively if a community is being priced out of survival.
Now, here is where brilliant policy meets economics. Think about it. If a utility asks you to save water, they sell less product and lose money. That's a terrible business model, right? Enter revenue decoupled rate structures. This is a total game changer. It basically separates the fixed costs of maintaining the pipes from the actual volume of water sold. It perfectly aligns economic incentives with environmental ones. The utility gets the stable funding it needs to survive, and they are no longer financially punished when customers do the right thing and conserve water.
But obviously, affordability means nothing without safety. What goes down our drains is a huge deal. Both wastewater output and drinking water inputs are heavily scrutinized for emerging contaminants. We're talking pharmaceutical residues, flame retardants, and those nasty endocrine-disrupting chemicals. Utilities have to prove they have solid hazard-based or risk-based approaches to handle these threats, because a failure here, that's way worse than bad PR. Formal enforcement actions can lead to massive fines or even the government stepping in and seizing the business.
Which brings us to our final section, climate resiliency and future-proofing. This is the big, urgent question. How on earth do these sprawling physical networks survive an increasingly hostile global climate?
So the crucial point is that climate change is not some far-off theoretical issue here. It is a daily operational nightmare. Utilities absolutely must disclose if they're pulling water from regions suffering from high baseline water stress or if they're overly reliant on buying wholesale water from third parties. And on the flip side, intense storms can easily overwhelm a treatment plant's capacity. That leads to sanitary sewer overflows. Yeah, raw sewage entering the environment, which inevitably triggers unplanned service disruptions and community-wide boil water advisories.
To put that risk into perspective, let's look at this number, 1%. That represents the annual chance of flooding in what's known as a 100-year flood zone. Under these strict reporting standards, utilities are required to explicitly disclose exactly how much of their wastewater treatment capacity is sitting right inside these perilous 1% zones. It's a really stark metric that immediately strips away the fluff and reveals a utility's true physical vulnerability.
And this reporting framework brilliantly illustrates how comprehensive the analysis really is. You've got these exact accounting codes, like 450A.1, that investors use to totally bypass a company's PR spin. They track the cold, hard facts, from the exact volume of recycled water successfully delivered to customers to what percentage of a sewer overflow was actually recovered. It forces utilities to put their money where their mouth is and prove exactly how they're future-proofing their networks against extreme weather.
So, the core takeaway for this final section: hoping for the best just doesn't cut it. Minimizing future risks takes immense strategic planning and serious capital investment today. True resiliency means relentlessly diversifying where your water comes from, mastering advanced wastewater recycling, and getting ahead of the game by replacing aging distribution pipes way before they decide to burst.
So, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to ponder. The next time you walk over and turn on your kitchen tap, take a second to think about the incredible, invisible data driving that flow. Based on all the metrics we've explored today, from the ghost water leaks to the decoupled rates, right down to those 100-year flood zones, is your local water utility actually prepared for the next century of climate and economic chaos? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the big questions, and I'll catch you next time.